All right. Welcome, everybody. We're happy to see you here this afternoon. Welcome to the California Coalition for Inclusive Learning presents Universal Resources webinar today. Today is going to be a tour of all things UDL related to the resources, free resources that we have available on our project website today. So we're really excited to have you as we see participants starting to kind of file in to the Zoom on this Monday afternoon. Hope that you are all well and all safe with us. Again, if you are just popping into the Zoom, welcome aboard. This is the California Coalition for Inclusive Learning. We call ourselves CCIL, and this webinar is going to serve as an orientation for the resources that we have available on our project website today. On the screen in front of you, there is a QR code. If you are zooming in from a place that you want to access the slides and the materials, we've also provided a bit.ly for you. The bit.ly to access the content is bit.ly/capital U, capital R, dash, capital H, capital B, and that will take you to a home-based document that has all of the resources that we are going to talk about today in the webinar. So we're really happy to have you join us today.
Did we want to give them a peek of what it might look like, or we want to do it a little?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elisa.
Yeah, let's do the next slide and then we'll do the introductions
All
too.
right,
Perfect.
Let me go to this.
All right. So once again, thanks for joining us. My name is Shamron Coyle. I am the project director for the CCIL project, and I am joined by my friend and colleague, Elisa Torres-Barton. I will let Elisa introduce herself as well.
Hi, everybody. Elisa Torres-Barton, coming to you from Fresno, California, right in the Central Valley. And I have one foot at CAST, directing the PL project for CAST, for CCIL for CAST, and also housed at the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. So excited to be here with you.
Happy to have you. I am housed out of the Placer County Office of Education. So I'm up in the north, and we've got Elisa down in kind of the south and the Central Valley today. So we also have some colleagues helping us out in the background. We're joined by Jennifer Hanks and Becky Canham, also out of the Placer County Office of Education. So we've got folks that are paying attention to the chat, and we'll be dropping links and resources for you as well. So for your learning environment, whether you are zooming in live with us now or you are watching the recording, you have access to what we call a home base document. This home base has live links to the slides, a description of the webinar. Our webinar survey is on there. Also on that home base document, you will see names and contact information for regional support that folks can access in California to get additional support and information about UDL implementation in your areas. So you'll find all of that there on the home base. And then any link that is shared today in the chat during the webinar, we will also be populating a section on that home base document for you to have access to that information as well. So joining us today, we are in a webinar session. So the chat box is going to be our best source of communication and information. If you are joining us and you're so inclined, we'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat. You can use the chat to ask or answer a question, share an idea, a resource, or a connection. And we love when our friends and colleagues hyperlink resources. Again, anything that's shared in the chat is also going to be added to our home base document. So we're really happy to have you with us today and really look forward to the expertise of the field as well. For those of you that are joining live, just a reminder that when you are sharing something in the chat, you have the opportunity to select everyone. If you want it to go to everybody in the webinar, you can also make the selection to just send a chat directly to the hosts or the panelists. So just a quick reminder about that. So for our inclusive welcome today, we've just kind of turned the calendar of the new year, and we'd love to know what is your New Year's resolution or a goal or maybe a word or a mantra that you have for the year. So we welcome you to share that information in the chat. Elisa, do you have one this year?
Enjoy the middle, right? I feel like I'm in the middle, in the thick of it for a lot of areas of my life and motherhood and partnership and work. And so just be present and be in the
Yes,
middle, right? Yeah.
yes,
How about
yes.
you, Sham?
I think I'm seeing one in there right now from our friend and colleague Becky. Her mantra for 2025 is less yes. And so being in that space and just being really present and not taking on more than I can handle, I think is where I'm at right now. So I see another one in there. Joy says that she is here and hers is to live authentically.
Mhm.
It's a great time of year to just kind of pause and reflect in January. So thank you for those that were sharing in the chat. It's always nice to hear. What about you, Jen?
Mine is there are no accidents.
Mm.
The universe is always telling us something. And I see that our friend Heather here, she wrote set boundaries. And Leah has shared no by 2025, more mindful spending. Our friend Audra said walk in beauty together.
Mm.
So lots of great ones in the chat.
Yeah, I always get more inspired by other people's than my own. All right. Thank you for sharing those. We appreciate it. Keep the chat going. Okay, so our project to you is brought in partnership with the California Department of Education, the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, CCEE, and Placer County Office of Education is the recipient of this grant project, and we partner with CAST in the development of the content. And then in addition to the CCIL leadership, if you look on the home base document, but you'll also see here on the slide, we have partnerships across the state. So Fresno County Office of Education, Los Angeles, San Joaquin County Office of Education, Santa Clara, Sonoma, Imperial County SELPA, and this year we have partnerships with 2 geographic lead regions, the Valley to Coast Collaborative and the Capital Central Foothill Area Consortium. So again, anywhere in the state of California, if you want additional support and you want to talk to somebody about your needs in terms of UDL implementation, we have support across the state that can answer that call. And we really encourage you to reach out if you have additional questions. The other call out that we'd like to share in our session today is this great resource that's been developed by CCEE, the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence. We actually have a whole California statewide system of support, and our project is part of that statewide systems of support under the resource leads and initiatives. In addition to our work, the reason why we're sharing this is across the board, there are so many great free resources to help schools and districts across the state with continuous improvement. Pretty much any topic and any area of need that you have, you would be able to find a direct resource or an actual person to connect to further give you information to meet your needs in terms of what you're looking for. So on the screen, we have the most recent infographic from CCEE and the statewide systems of support. This was a resource that I'd wished that I'd had in my previous role as a site principal, not just knowing all of the great resources that are out there that have been vetted, that people are actively working on to support continuous improvement in California. This is a great opportunity for folks, the schools, district level, to reach out and see what kind of free resources are there. So please add this to your bookmark tab on your internet browser. It's one of the first places that I go, and I see that Jen has dropped that for you in the chat as well as the website. So great resources there from our partners at CCEE. And just a little bit of background about our project. We have designed our project to kind of work in 3 tiers. Right now, today, we are at the bottom of this infographic with the California-wide resources, or we call them the universal resources. And so we have webinars and training videos and graphic organizers and planning guides and all sorts of resources that are available to you free of charge on our project website, which is ccil.cast.org. In addition to the universal resources that we provide, we spend a considerable amount of time working directly with schools and districts and helping them with their UDL implementation. That is also a resource that's available to you. And then we have spent a lot of time really planning and providing intensive support for our local county offices of education. During a grant, sometimes the timeline is limited, so we've really maximized this opportunity by building the capacity of those county office partners that we referenced in a previous slide. And so just a little bit about our background and some of the structure of our project. Did you want to add anything to that, Elisa?
Just that it's a familiar graphic, right? When we talk about universal, and then that intense piece, that we try to mirror what's happening in the school systems, as to how these universal resources were designed. So we're excited that you're here because universal means available to all. Anybody can click on our links and the website and get access to it. And then if you're more curious, you can tap into further resources.
Great. Thank you, Elisa. So our goals for today, this is really serving as an orientation to how you might learn, actually utilize the resources that we have available on our project website. So we're hoping to introduce you to the resources around UDL implementation, and we're going to explore the structure of the content. One of the things that we know in universal design is having some predictability really helps with the learning structure. And so we've taken that to heart in the design of our resources on our website, and we'll talk you through that structure today, and then provide some tips and tricks on how they might be used in a specific context through that leader lens, an educational leader or administrator, through a coaching lens, and also resources for direct application in the classroom. And then again, we've got information for support and coaching if you want to go beyond the universal resources. We actually have people to connect you with directly. So again, thinking about what might be a personal goal that you have for yourself today. So I'll give you a minute just to think about, if you're here and you're participating live or you're listening and zooming in, what is your goal for the session today? We know how intricately learning is linked to goal setting. So we'll pause for just a few seconds and let folks think about what is their lens and how might they be thinking about the content that we're going to be sharing today. Okay, hopefully you had a minute to kind of gather your thoughts and pull anything else up that you might want at your fingertips today. So as we move forward into the rest of our session today, we want to offer up a couple of guiding questions. What resources are available and how do I know which resources to use? And Lisa's going to talk us through a little bit more about information about this.
For sure. So these guiding questions, friends, are another representation of the goals, right? So Shamron shared these beefy, wordy goals. And then so if you are a questions person or your brain is at a question mode, essentially what we're going to get at is what resources are available and how might I know which resources to use. So a quick 411 on the website. You heard Shamron already share the address was cecil.cas.org or ccil.cast.org. And there are 3 buckets or mediums by which you will be able to engage in a particular topic. So for each topic, there's a webinar format or top tips and a got a minute. And when we're thinking about the structure, like how might we design these resources, we were thinking much like, if you know UDL, that we're thinking about what is the clear goal? And then what barriers might we anticipate? So in service of that, the top tips is literally a one pager you can print. We were even cognizant of if you had a printer that had color or not. That's how intentional we were about this work. The Got a Minute is an entry point, and we're going to walk you through a bit of that. We're going to click on a specific Got a Minute here in a bit, which says if I only have 10 minutes, what might I do? If I have 20 minutes, what might I do? If I have 45. And then the webinar is this type of medium that we're also familiar with, which is a recording around the particular topic that, of course, you can watch on 1.5 or whatever our favorite Hashem,
Yes.
watching the recording. But before we go deeper into that, anytime we get in front of an audience, we like to rewind a little bit because sometimes it could be that our colleagues may have been familiar with UDL. They might have just clicked on this. By the way, this video is going to live on the website in the front, on the homepage, not the front. Dating myself on the homepage. Hold on. On the homepage to orient our colleagues and our parents and any other community partner that is curious about these resources. It'll live there. So to that end, we want to rewind a little bit and go into a little bit of the universal design for learning. So a reminder that universal design for learning is an approach to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all, to improve and optimize. And how we do that is about setting clear, rigorous goals, anticipating barriers, and proactively designing to minimize those barriers. And these three mechanisms or resources that are tied to these topics are our attempt, our hypothesis of what might be a way to minimize barriers for our educators and our community partners out there in the field. Another nugget is that, just so that you know you're not alone, is that there are documents which are called frameworks in education speak to universal design for learning being an approach to support and reach the margins, and not only the margins, all learners. And so not only is it part of MTSS, it's part of this preschool curriculum framework, part of the comprehensive state literacy plan, part of the English language learners development framework, mathematics, the arts, the history, the science, world languages. And even at the federal level, there's documents that identify universal design for learning as a framework to support the design that includes more learners.
Elisa, we also have them in the California standards for
Well, that's right, the
professional.
CSTPs, that's right,
Yeah.
for the teaching
Yeah.
profession, another
Yep.
acronym, friends.
The California standards for the teaching profession. Yes.
There we go. There we go. Okay, so what if I had to give you a one pager of what are the tenets or what is the thinking behind universal design for learning, it'll be on this slide. At the top are these pieces that we call the foundational concepts, which in essence are the thinking behind the considerations, so that the barriers of the design, not the learner, the barriers of the design, not the learner, that variability is the norm. Usually I follow it up with saying there's no such thing as average, no such thing as an average brain or student, right? The human really, that it is contextual and it can be planned for. And then the goal of UDL is to support developing learner agency. So in the middle, it says it can be planned for. How might we plan for that? That's through the UDL design process, which I have read to you from the definition of universal design. So what is that process? Is setting clear, rigorous goals, anticipating variability, and designing options to minimize those barriers. So all of that sounds poetic, right? So we know it's in the frameworks. We know that it's so human-centered by saying the barriers in the design, not the learner. But we also know about UDL implementation, just like good systemic implementation, it takes time. It can take an average of 5 to 7 years. And I say that loosely because if we know anything about education, is that change is the constant, right? I remember as being a site leader, I never knew who was retiring. Well, not that I didn't know who was retiring, but I knew there was going to be an influx of the humans on our campus, and more importantly, of the learners on our campus. So that takes time, and that's okay. But through these resources, we're hoping to support at any entry point, and that's why Shamron said, whether you're a coach or a leader or a parent or a community member, that you can contribute to what it might mean to create that access and agency for all learners, but knowing it takes time. So, okay, so it takes 5 to 7 years. We don't want you to walk away like, okay, quit, exit, exit this webinar now. That we're going to support you in having some concrete topics and ideas of pieces that are going to help with that UD implementation. So back to that guiding question. What resources are available? and how do I know which resources to use? So we have a
Elisa,
couple of, go ahead.
yeah, I think it's important to note that when we started designing a lot of these were topics and resources that we wished that we had access to when we were working at school sites, when we were
Yeah.
site principals, when we were classroom teachers. And so we really tried to design a lot of this content through that lens. Elisa and I
Absolutely.
both come with a background in site leadership and teaching, obviously, and it's a lot of that's adorable. I wish that I had this resource. And
Absolutely.
with the added component and what we identified in our development of these resources is one of the constant challenges that we always have within our system is time. And so we were really cognizant of the design of these resources to be able to be usable and fit into the existing time systems and structures that we have traditionally on our school campuses. A lot of these resources can be used during a staff meeting, during a professional learning community time, during staff development, and then also they have been designed for individual learning to do on your own. And so keeping that in mind, we were really cognizant of the design, not only of the content, but the time chunks and the increments that we have for these resources so that they can fit into a staff meeting. They can fit into a PLC timeframe for folks to work with.
Absolutely. And I think it'll become more concrete when we walk you through a goal setting. We're going to pick a topic and walk you through all the three different mediums. And so the topics, the other part that I love, Sharon, is that we've kept the resources we developed when we started in 2020. I giggle because we all know what happened, right? We developed, co-developed some resources that happened during our hybrid season, right? Hybrid season of instruction. And so on the left-hand side, there's topics like becoming expert readers and writers, accessibility and hybrid literacy, engaging in literacy, executive functions, building comprehension, expression and communication, reflection and goal setting.
And I have to say, Lisa, when we developed those, we were really cognizant of the fatigue that was happening because it was such an innovative time in education that everybody was developing so many new resources and materials to answer this call of teaching in during a pandemic, that we were also cognizant of this fatigue. And so keeping it in short chunks of learning was one of the ways that we addressed that particular barrier. And then we continued, obviously life has moved on since the pandemic. And so we have resources that we've called Beyond Hybrid. And so these really help to kind of continue to solidify those foundational concepts that Elisa talked about in that one slide that we have about barrier in the design. Variability is the norm and the goal is expert learning. And so these topics of mindset and goal setting and assessment, barriers and options and expert learning, self-reflection and literacy across the curriculum, meaning making and writing, all of those were designed with that in mind to keep supporting your implementation efforts beyond a professional development session, perhaps with an outside agency, perhaps with the CCIL project or some of the other UDL projects that we have in California, such as SIP and open access. So we've really tried to design these with that end user in mind, so that we have resources that we can easily go to and fit them into our already existing systems and structures.
Can I add a +1?
Please, Jen.
Well, I work with a completely virtual school district, right? They are TK-12. And so in the hybrid classroom has a lot of great tools for them. But the other thing in looking through all of those is also pulling out the pieces that are applicable even if you are not in a hybrid classroom, right? That have to build that learner agency for the kids that really did excel when they were forced to be remote. And there are pieces that you can still put in your design that support those learners who prefer or do better with those kinds of pieces. So even though it says in the hybrid classroom, there's a lot of great learning in there that's applicable in all pieces, right?
100%.
Just wanted to throw that out there.
Thanks, Jen. One of the things that I'll share about our resources is everything that we provide you, for example, our webinars, we're not only posting the recording, we're actually giving you the slide deck to have access to. So you can make a copy of these resources, these slide decks, this content, and flip it and make it your own, and personalize it for your particular context. And so that was a perfect example of how you might kind of use some of these. So thinking about it through that lens, and again, I go back to that guiding question: what resources are available and how do I know which resources to use? My answer to that is it depends. And so we're going to get in a little bit deeper into that and look at the additional resources that we have to support implementation, kind of beyond that classroom setting.
The other piece about where might I start is that the list is written in a particular, maybe our best thinking what an order might be, right? So you might consider starting with mindset and then goal setting and assessment. But again, our advice is going to be all it depends, right? So if my team is already had been working on assessment, it might be that I start with the assessment topic and then tackle mindset. So it's not all or nothing. It is not one particular way, right? Because it's variability. But we did set it up in a like pie in the sky. If you were starting from scratch, what might you start with? Of course, we would think mindset is a big shift because just that principle of the bears and the design, not the learners, sometimes can cause some cognitive dissonance in different systems. And so just know these are recommendations based on not knowing your context at all. But because of variability and you knowing your teams and your system and yourselves, feel free to enter at any place that makes sense to you. So the next set of series that we've designed, it's through the lens of UDL series, right? So we shy away from saying like UDL because it implies, right, even subconsciously that it's a plus and a thing and added to. And if we know UDL well, we understand that it's a lens, a pair of glasses I put on that all of a sudden surface things that I did not consider before. So might it be the physical learning environment that you want to consider through the lens of UDL, social emotional learning, multilingual learning, mathematics, foundational reading, co-teaching, early childhood. And then we've deepened our understanding around these other areas because there was an expansion of the UDL guidelines this past July. So we did some resources around that. Community partnerships. What might community partnerships look like through the lens of UDL? Assessment, never an old topic. Every spring, it's a thing. Oh, that just rhymed. Executive function, career technical education's coming up next month. Lesson design, universal resources around supporting implementation at the school-wide level, and then leadership. Anything else you want to add in that bucket before we dive into the goal setting?
I think the other thing that comes up, again, that order or a scope and sequence also comes to mind. We've intentionally designed the content around these through the lens of UDL series based on the needs that are popping up in the field. So as we are out working with school sites, working with districts, working with teachers and leaders, these are sometimes the questions or the problems of practice that are surfacing during a particular time of the year. And so we've been mindful around that as we have put together our content for this coming year around webinars and top tips in the Got a Minute series. And so it's been great to explore those through that lens.
Dan, so I'm going to jump when we go to the GAM real quick, just to share with colleagues. Thank you, Jennifer, for putting the resources link in the chat. So these tabs at the top, I don't know if that's the right social media word, but anyway, at the top, you can toggle between just looking at all the webinars, just looking at all the GAMs, all the Got a Minutes, all the top tips. This is about the school implementation. Or you can enter it through the topics themselves. And so when you hover over resources by topic, let's say you click on mindset, we're going to go to goal setting in a bit, but when you scroll, you'll see there's a Got a Minute for mindset, there's a webinar for mindset, and there's a top tips for mindset and actually a featured resource.
Lots of different layers, lots of different points of entry around a topic. And so the user can also choose their pathway. I'm in the mood, or perhaps I'm going to put on a webinar and listen to that while I'm driving from point A to point B, and use it almost like a podcast. I've got 10 minutes of learning. I might have some time to jump into a Got a Minute series. So we're actually going to start to look at the resources by topic, and we're going to walk you through the Got a Minute series for goal setting in particular. And so if you go to our website, Elisa showed you previously, you'll toggle over and go directly to that Got a Minute link, or you can go to it by topic. And like I said, all of these are free universal resources. So we're providing you the actual slide deck for you to take and use widely in your context. And so let's dig in and start walking them through a Got a Minute series. So one of the things that we know about Universal Design for Learning is having some predictable options really helps the brain stay organized and know what to expect. So every single Got a Minute series on our website follows this predictable pattern. You'll have the introductory slides, and I'll quote, if you go back to that previous slide, I'm going to quote our colleague in the Zoom right now, Becky Canham says, "Time is an educator's kryptonite." Every time, the thing that we always say that we wish we had more of in education is time. We always think we don't have enough time. We don't have enough time. So this is a resource that you can use, and we've broken it down into chunks of time. So if you have 10 minutes to spare, or you have the brain width to pay attention to something for just 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 45 minutes, the Got a Minute series is a great place for you to start. We will always walk you through materials that you would need. We will always link the materials directly on that slide for you. So for this one, the only linked resource we have on the materials, we have provided you a note-taking guide for this. And then the other materials you would need would be perhaps lesson plans, or a teacher's edition of your adopted curriculum would be something helpful to use for this particular module. And then we come to the table of contents. Again, this is outlining how you can use these materials. So if you just have 10 minutes of learning, this is a great opportunity for you to just deepen your understanding of the importance of goal setting and look at how you might start to craft and communicate clear goals for your learners. If you have the bandwidth or time for 20 minutes, we're going to take it a little bit further and talk about the importance of separating the goal from the means. And we're going to actually start to look at how to design goals that are flexible without the means embedded. And if you've got the full time or the bandwidth for 45 minutes of learning, this module would take you through from start to finish to design or redesign learning goals to be clear and relevant and rigorous and in service of that learner agency that we talked about before. And then at the end of each Got a Minute series, you're going to find a Got Another Minute, and we're always going to link additional resources there for you to explore. So on the first portion of the Got a Minute series, we there is a video recording of this particular presentation. And again, the slide deck is there. And so if I was engaging within this module as a learner, I'm actually going to follow along with these particular steps. So the first step is I would look at the recording that would be there for me. And depending on the topic, it's going to vary depending on your point of entry and what module you're exploring. And then I'm going to pause and reflect individually, or perhaps if I'm doing this in a staff meeting or in a PLC or with a group of colleagues, I'm going to think about, why are goals important for learners? And reflect on one of my learning goals from a previous lesson. And I'm going to think about these questions. How did I communicate or present the goal to the learners in my context? And how did I make sure that the goal was clear and understood by the learners? And are there pieces of it that I might want to think about revising?
So it's just it's building a connection between something you already know. We're making the point of why this topic is so important. And then So it's nothing completely brand new. It's just helping us reflect. I would say, Sham, is the first 10 minutes of all the GAMs are helping us, connecting us to the why and helping us reflect, an opportunity to reflect. Because I mean, it's 10 minutes. So
Yeah, it's always, here's the topic and what do I think about it? And why am I coming here in the first place? How does this connect to my current context?
yeah.
That's the predictable pattern that you're going to see with all of the resources in this setting. You want to talk us through the 20-minute component,
The
Lisa?
20-minute, it's a little bit of that modeling, seeing what it looks like in practice. And so again, this was, there's a recording of the presentation. So we'll reflect with a colleague or on our own. How does crafting flexible goals without the means embedded minimize barriers and support, right? So that a bit more of the how, and then seeing some sample goals or creating your own. So the why first, the 10 minutes, and then the how might I do that, or what does it look like? Because the next part is going to lead us to, ooh, what might I design or redesign based on what I just learned or was reminded of, really.
Perfect.
Okay. And then the 45-minute is making it tangible. And so we often give you a template with design considerations or questions to reflect on. Sometimes we give you a template to use to support you. Every single topic is different. But for this one, for example, is how might we make goals relevant and meaningful? Neuroscience teaches us that, emotions play an important role. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but it's, again, almost like spiraling is what we used to call it back in the day as a math teacher, spiraling what we talked about the first 10 minutes, what you might have seen in the 20-minute section. And now as we wind down and land the plane and do something with it, we prompt you with some of those questions. So you might ask yourself, how can learners personally connect and engage with goals? Have I provided opportunities for learners to articulate, and so on and so forth? So we give you nuggets and then give you the resources again to be able to craft and design your own. And actually, this one actually includes a goal design template.
Exactly. We use this regularly across the board. Actually, Becky and I did a goal design session on Friday with a group of folks too. So this is one of the most critical components, I think, of universal design for learning. And whenever we have questions or problems of practice, the first question that I always ask from a coaching standpoint is, well, what was the goal? What is the goal of the lesson? What is the goal of the activity? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Because without that clear goal, the rest of the design can be frustrating. It can be meaningless, and it actually could pose a barrier in and of itself if I'm not clear on what my goal is. And so this Got a Minute series, I think the reason why we start with mindset and then goal setting is because this is one of the most critical components of successfully designing with universal design for learning in mind. And so
And the other,
go
ahead,
ahead,
Shay.
Elisa.
I was just going to say that also, and we would love this, is that we would love your feedback. So as you use these materials, either on your own or with colleagues, what did you learn about learner variability that we could, as designers, learn and we can continue to iterate? So this is not just a facetious moment in time, like we need your no, like we literally look at that Google Doc and see what's come in about how our colleagues in the field have used this and or questions that they're asking or other considerations. I wanted to hop over to the top tips, Sham, so
Yes,
our
please.
friends can see. So again, if you have the 10, 50, 20, you go to the GAM, the webinar, it's the classic. Here's the video and the slides for the webinar. So the top tips is literally the one pager. And it's a Google Doc, so this one should feel familiar. Just be cognizant of what we've learned the hard way is some school systems have different, I don't know what they're called, platforms that may or may not allow. But anyway, so here's 5 tips, top tips for goal setting. And they're not exactly what you'll find in the Got a Minute or the GAM. It is not exactly what you find in the webinar. We designed these to be layered learning with entry points of time, but it's still the same topic. So these 5 top tips are setting clear goals, communicating, design flexible goals, craft relevant and meaningful, frame the goal with expert learning or learner agency in mind. So again, it's just a space to be able to enter at different spaces, right? Sometimes all I have was 30 seconds and was the one pager. So you have
And we designed all of our top tips, are almost all of them a single page, and they're food for thought. They're questions to keep me thinking or to refresh my memory about something that I'd learned about, or, oh, I forgot about that component, or how do I have flexibility embedded in my lesson design in service of this learning goal? So they're really meant to be kind of food for thought, quick reminders, or a quick point of entry to kind of introduce us to this topic. You can
Yeah.
start with the top tips and then dig deeper and go into one of the Got a Minute modules or into the webinar, even if you wanted to have some deeper learning there.
For sure. Before Becky, you go, I think you almost muted. The other thing I've sometimes done, friends, and I've printed it out, like I'm not ready to play with goals right now, but I know I'm going to need it. So sometimes I'll just old school print it, put it next to my computer. And when I'm ready to design, okay, what do I need to think about or consider? Becky, go friend.
Yeah, I was just going to add on, the top tips are also a great resource to think about as a coach. So when working with educators, when they're designing their goals, it's just some things to support that coaching conversation.
That's great. That's a great tool.
Thank you for that. Elisa, can you go back to the website and go to a webinar? Go to the webinar section so we can give them a quick orientation of what they'll see for webinars. So when we're there, you're always going to find the most recent one that's coming. So you'll have, obviously we have our webinar that's happening today. But the registration for the upcoming webinar in a couple of weeks, CTE and UDL being facilitated by Jennifer Hanks, who's on our Zoom today. That's always there. But if you scroll down further, you're going to find a very similar orientation. You're going to have a one paragraph description of what the webinar is about, and you're going to have access to the slide deck. Once the recording is available, we post that on the website immediately. So like I said, you can pull up the webinar recording and listen to it as if you were listening to a podcast on a drive or on a walk, or maybe while you're multitasking in your office. But we're also always providing you with the slide deck so you can utilize this context again in the future. One of the lenses that we kind of had in our design of these resources, particularly through that leader lens of, I don't know about you, Elisa, but when I was a school principal, I really struggled to find the time to design quality professional learning for my staff meetings and for the time that I had with my staff. And so this kind of answers the call of, I'd really like to support the professional development of my staff. We've had a one-day workshop, or we've done some professional development around universal design for learning. This is a great place for you to come to keep that learning alive throughout the year so that your professional development isn't just a one and done. These are topics that you can continue to engage in within the context of your school site throughout the year, and they will be here for you for a long time, and you'll be able to access them and use them widely in your context. So I will go to a webinar, refresh myself by listening to it for an upcoming session. And I'm still going back to our webinars and making copies of those slide decks and reusing them in a variety of contexts and settings. And so that's one of those resources that I continue to go back to on a regular basis. So that's what you'll find on our webinars. You'll have to dig a little deeper to look for some of the content that we had in our hybrid sessions. And in the first round of the grant, you'll see that on the screen. It's a purple band and it has previous topics and archived content there for you. But again, you'll find all of the recordings and all of the slide decks there for your use.
And so back to that piece, Jam, that you're talking about from the leadership seat, this is an opportunity to provide your teams flexibility without having to worry about it. So for example, our PLC decided we're going to work on mindset. Okay, team, go deploy, go learn about mindset. Let them figure out how they want to learn about mindset. Is it the top tips? Is it the webinar? Is it the Got a Minute? Is it? And then discuss, right? So it provides some flexibility without the leaders having to design too much.
So let's look at it through these different lenses, and we talked about that at the beginning. So if we go, what resources are available, and how do I know to use them? We have a few lenses for you to consider in this. So from a teacher lens and working with schools and districts across the state, we have heard, or you might feel that something along the lines of, this sounds great. I love this stuff and I'm ready for more. So you can come to the website to continue your own learning and explore topics by choice that is most relevant to your current context. It's a good place to be. I've been recently introduced to UDL and where do I start? And so we've provided some content for you, again, in those manageable learning chunks for you to engage in that content from that lens of a teacher. Or you can think of it from this viewpoint of, I'm stuck and I could use some additional resources and ideas. So think of this as your one-stop shop for UDL, much like you would go to California Educators Together or Teacher Paid Teachers or Pinterest. This is another place that you can add to your bookmarks that's specific for universal design for learning. What about the coach or leader lens? Becky talked about that for a second. What would you say about that, Elisa?
Yeah, I mean, how often have we heard, we've had a few days of professional learning on UDL. How do I continue this fire, right? Like, the teachers are, yes, let's do it, let's go, let's go. Or another thing you might hear, what additional resources are available to go beyond the professional learning days? Because we know that, what is it? The time is a kryptonite, and also my master calendar.
Time as an
As a
educator.
principal, just cited 18 months before. So back to, this is just another representation of what Sham and I talked about earlier. Lots of entry points, lots of flexibility for you to pick and choose. If I could be a whisper coach, if you're a leader out there, I would say you peruse first. Get familiar with the things, pose some questions, connect with us. We're going to give you the contact information. Hey, Sham, this is great. Yeah, but, or yes, or I have some questions. And then provide those opportunities for your teams.
Yeah, for that coach and leader lens, one of the districts that I'm working with, I have a principal that is actually using the Got a Minute series, and she's sending those out and having her staff go through the 10-minute and the 20-minute modules in their weekly grade level PLC or department PLC meetings. And then they're doing the remaining portion of it as part of their staff meeting when they're all together. So she's making it kind of a hybrid version where there's team learning or individual learning, with the expectation that when we all come together, we're going to use this to continue to build coherence about what implementation looks like in their particular context.
Fantastic. So
Okay, this one is my favorite.
Yeah.
We hear this very often, and again, this was a strong pull in motivating our design for these topics. It's UDL is great, but my students have to take standardized tests in the spring. How does this work? And so we answered the call, and one of my favorite ones, and still as a learner, it's one of my favorite topics that we have archived on our website, is the accessibility from assessment to instruction series. And I think the motivation for this came when I was working at a school site, and it was the week before state testing, and the teachers were there, you know, there's this frenzy and there's stressful energy. And the question that came up was, testing is next week. Did you turn on that accessibility feature? Was that marked for use for that student? And I'm thinking to myself, do they know how to use it anyway? This should have been something that we're teaching and using for students throughout the year. And so that accessibility from assessment to instruction series will walk you through and actually talks about how our state tests are universally designed and what resources are available for students to use that are there. And that was Elise Yerke was a colleague that worked on the project back when we did that series. And this one is one that I return to often. And I take those slide decks and I modify them and I reuse them and work with teachers and leaders across the state. And so The first one in that series is how our assessments universally designed, and it actually talks about our statewide assessments and how there are built-in universal supports there. And then we move from that big picture of the statewide assessments into practical application in the classroom. And we have a phrase that we use often in UDL is what's necessary for some is good for all. And the resources in this particular series, I think, really embody that concept for us. And so I really encourage folks to kind of go back and as a principal, I would probably do this series in October. I would do October, November, December. Let's engage in some learning. That way we're starting to implement these universal supports, and we're teaching students how to use them throughout the year so that when they come to the springtime with some of our high stakes testing, they already know what to do to help themselves when they get stuck. It's a great resource.
The next two series were the IEP, the Individualized Education Plan series. You have your favorite with the assessment champ. For me, the parents and guardians. I want to say this is the one where we had parent advocates sharing their stories.
Yes.
And then we had a webinar on universally designing the SST process and then universally designing IEP goals. Again, these are all hyperlinked here on the slide deck, right? These are the 3 series that we did on this umbrella of systems of support. Like this is what's happening in the classroom, but how might we, through the lens of UDL, design these systems of support? So
yeah, UDL doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it doesn't
Mhm.
happen in an individual classroom. We have to prepare the whole system. We like to call it the ecosystem. What is the system doing in response to supporting the work of teachers, to support the work of students? And so we're really looking at it through that lens of the classroom level lens, the system level lens, and what we can do to leverage those resources in support of continuous learning and improvement for all of our students.
And we even did one on alternative dispute resolution. So we have resources there available to the field.
Perfect.
Let me escape out of this. I don't like showing the tabs. All right, my friend.
So our closing reflections. What is something that you saw today that maybe confirmed your work, something that you've been thinking about? What might you explore next? Is there a particular resource or topic that you're interested in engaging in? But the other selfish question that we'll pose is how else might the project support your work? And a great place to answer that question would be in our feedback loop. So we'll definitely, I think Jen will go ahead and post our feedback survey. If you are tuning in via Zoom, please make sure we've linked our feedback questions also on that home base document. So we take it very seriously. But we also talked about where to go for additional support. So you can contact me directly and I can connect you to the appropriate person in your region. So you'll see on the slide in front of you my name and my email address. But we also have partners across the state. We have Santa Clara County Office of Education in the Bay Area. In the Central Valley, you can contact Fresno and San Joaquin County Offices of Education. Los Angeles County Office of Education, and Imperial County SELPA is a new partner this year. Those are serving our Southern California region. Up north, we have Placer and Sacramento area and Sonoma County Office of Education. And then we have 2 geographic lead agencies, the Valley to Coast Collaborative in Southern California, and then the Capital Central Foothills Area Consortium continues to support the northern part of the state. So anywhere you live in California, we can connect you to an actual person if you're interested in learning more and engaging more deeply than the resources that we have available for you here on the website. And so
We have all that contact information in the home base too.
Yes, we did. We actually put names and emails of folks to contact there. All right, I do want to give a plug for our upcoming session. We have Jennifer Hanks on the call with us today, and I think this one is a passion project and a labor of love for her. The California Technical CTE and UDL series is going to be coming at you with Jennifer
Not
Hanks.
California, career.
Career, sorry, I see the C, career and technical education. So
With
Jen is
Don
partnering.
Walker from CAST. It's gonna be so fun. I hope people join us because
I'm
both
excited.
Don and I are both very passionate about it. So it should be great.
And then in February, we're hosting actually a lesson design workshop. March, we will be looking at universal resources again through that system lens, and we'll be exploring the school-wide implementation. And then in May, we will be closing out our series this year with leadership through the lens of UDL. And so you can register for those on those links there. We look forward to seeing you again. If you can't make the live session and you register, you'll be sent the recording and the session materials after it's available for you. We always say feedback is a gift. We take it very seriously, and we don't improve without it. So we really appreciate any input and feedback you can provide for our project. It's really valuable to us.
Well, thank you for joining us. Thanks, Sham. Always fun to chat with the friends.
Yeah. On our next slide, Elisa, we've got one more for you.
Social.
Don't forget, we've got some presence in social media. Follow us on Instagram. You'll see we have a feature Friday where we talk about different elements, content from our universal resources. We highlight upcoming conferences, share resources from our project as well as our colleagues. And so we really encourage you to follow us on social media to stay connected there. So thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that these resources will continue to be used in your context. We thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon, and we hope to hear from you in the future. So thank you, Elisa. Thank you, Jen and Becky, and thanks to Dariela putting this all together for us. We appreciate you spending your Monday with us.
For sure. Thank you, everybody.
All right.